In our last conversation with Mpho, he shared with us his personal sense of hope and optimism, and how he manages to remain focused and disciplined as he navigates life's complexities. Today, we take a walk with Mpho as we consider the concept of having a growth mindset and the fact that perhaps one of the biggest frontiers we need to navigate as leaders today is our own mindset and attitude, most especially when we are faced with adversity.
Mpho, it's so good to see you again.
Absolutely.
And excited to be spending the day with you today at Equilibrium on our beautiful property. And even though it is winter and everything's a little bit dry and dusty, I thought it would position our conversation today so effectively because I wanted to talk to you today as we explore this concept around frontiers of leadership, around the concept of having a growth mindset. And how I got to that was when I was thinking about winter and looking at the dryness and how brown everything is. It struck me that there's an opportunity there to reframe and to consider my attitude. And because winter is an essential part of life, it's part of nature. And if we're thinking about that ability to reframe and consider our attitude, it talks to having a growth mindset. And perhaps one of the biggest frontiers that we have to that we need to navigate as leaders is our own mindset and our own attitude. How easy it is to see dust and brown and a lack of growth, whereas somebody else would look at this and say, winter is the time to reset. It's the time for deep sleep. And if we don't have winter, we can't move into spring.
You know, I would actually say that a number of successful leaders in the main succeed because they've had to overcome adversity. Either because they've come through a tough upbringing, or because they've had to go through. If you look at a number of leaders from the, say, silent generation, people born 1920s, slightly earlier than that, into about 1939, a lot of them will tell you how either they went barefoot to school, they'll tell you how either they grew up under tough work ethics, growing up on farms, and they've had to turn that tough upbringing into something that informs their work ethic. Then you'll also find people who will sometimes say to you that they've had to grow without a father, with a struggling working single mom. And all these things point to a fact that, firstly, over and above this analogy of is the glass half full, half empty, a lot of leaders have had to succeed on the basis of accepting that their circumstances do not limit or define them. And so a growth mindset is a necessity. Secondly, one would have to recall that before debates on equity and inclusivity, organizations tested people kind of ad infinitum. Even going to school, I remember when I had to go to a technical high school, I had to do a psychometric test to see, supposedly to see which way I'm inclined in terms of numeric versus technical.
I remember those.
But you get to the workplace, you still get tested again for aptitude. You had, my first role was in an Afrikaans environment. I started working in the Department of Post and Telecoms in 1990, 91, and it was still all Afrikaans. And so they had a thing, they call it a taxering centrum, which is really the management development center, where you'd be put into exercises to see how you deal with managing your inbox, outbox, what is your management aptitude and things like that. So every leader has had to go through either of those. Even today, most such panels that I've participated in appointing C-suite leaders, there's firstly, the panel discusses what they deem a success profile for the job. The candidates, once you get to the top 3, get profiled. The successful candidate gets further profiled in terms of fit for culture. Whether you use a leadership profiling tool, whether you use Enneagram or anything else that people use, people get profiled. And 100% of the time, it's about values fit with the organization they're being searched or recruited for. But equally, it's about what type of leader are they going to be. And most organizations aspire to be level 5 organizations. And often they find that I've seen organizations where they appoint a level 3 leader in a level 5 culture. And they expect this technocrat to do some really remarkable things.
Complex critical thinking.
That require complex critical thinking. And they find themselves perhaps winning the technical route of competing with your competitors, but not winning the battle of the broader complexity, the broader success in the technical macroeconomic risk environment. And so all these things point to the fact that you, in today's world, which is, people have called it a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, you can never use the past to predict success. And you can never say, well, if someone who was in this role before, my predecessor did this, I'll follow the same plan. You have to constantly be adapting. You have to be constantly be doing this thing that has become a bit of a swear word, resilient. Yeah. Because there's just so much crises coming at you. In fact, in 2021, the word of the year was polycrisis, which suggests that you operate in an environment where there's just a plethora of crises. 2022, December, the Collins Dictionary also had a word of the year called permacrisis. You are permanently in crisis. You're permanently in crisis in terms of your clients cutting budgets. You have to find ways of surviving in terms of cash flow. You are permanently in crisis in terms of technology throwing new things at you, and you have to invent things all the time. You find that if you're in an industrialized environment with trade unions, the trade union environment is also volatile. In the past, you used to know that there were certain major trade unions that belonged to certain political affiliations, no longer the case. So you find yourself a leader constantly having to figure things out. And then if you overlay the layer of systems thinking onto it, where you have to lead with an understanding that everything is interrelated, again, it throws you off. You can never just rely on a particular formula. And again, there's a notion that when it comes to people, because we get things done through people at the end of the day, there's no formula. Nobody can say to you, if you put Nikki and Mpho in the room, this is the outcome.
Exactly.
Their thought processes, their emotions, their outlook in terms of where they find themselves in the social space, home space, family space, will make them process knowledge and information differently. And then after all, as human beings, we're different. And you overlay that, the challenge of generational dynamics. Older generation, as in mostly baby boomers, In fact, baby boomers, I think, actually require a comprehensive study
Yes.
because they've proven to be the most resilient of the generations. They've gone through most of the changes. They've grown up with radio and television, so they're both auditory as well as visual. They've grown up with all sorts of manual systems, and they've had to adapt to technology as it got refined. Imagine being a baby boomer who used to jog with this big Walkman on your waist. And
You're
you've
talking to our generation.
no, we are Generation X. We just were
We're on that cusp.
tailoring behind the boomers, but so they may have been our older siblings in some instances. They may have been our uncles and aunts, and so we were able to learn from them and observe them as they switched and adapted to these generations, technological generations. But then if you look at the second tier of Gen X, so people that are born after 1975, 77, going towards the Gen Y, born after 1981, you will then find that a good number of these, as they started, so they know television more than they know radio. And the significance of the radio tradition is that if you look at leaders who grew up in an environment where radio had a certain starting time in the morning,
Exactly.
and by about 10 o'clock at night, broadcast services come to an end. So between 8, let's start back, say between 6 and 8, it was news, and normally it's the elders, their parents and so on that would sit around the radio to listen to the different broadcasts for the day. Then around just 8 o'clock, is time for whatever drama story that plays. The whole family gathers around the radio to listen to the story or to the drama. And then from 8:30, 9 onwards, it's music and social programs. People who grew up with that still have this notion of having a family meeting. And leaders like those tend to like the rituals of in the morning, let's all sit around the table, have our coffees and muffins, talk about what's going on with your day, and then from there everybody goes separate ways. So the staff room gathering is part of that tradition. But if you lead people who are born in the later years from 1981 up to the 90s, they don't have that. They're used to just coming, rushing, with whatever bag they're carrying on their shoulder, dumping and then get going. Sometimes they walk around with a muffin in their mouth or a sandwich in their mouth. So all these point to the need for leaders to be constantly self-empowering, self-improving and learning. Learning is a lifelong commitment that all leaders have to be embracing.